inventory and assessment phase of your work for some time. And when I say ambitious, I know that you're focused on forests and trees and consumption related emissions, in addition to the more kind of standard inventory sectors. So we can go into more detail than we probably need to today about all of that. But I will just say that's, the wheelhouse of ICLEI is to get into the nitty gritty of what greenhouse gas emissions management is all about. So not just the inventory accounting phase, but all the way to getting a climate action plan in place, implementing the plan, and making sure that the actions you're taking are actually reducing emissions. So with that, I did put together a little slide show because it's fun to look at pictures and charts and graphs. So let me get that pulled
Do
up.
you have control, Cal? Sometimes I don't know if Oswaldo's on. Can you let us know if you have any trouble
I
presenting?
think usually Google's pretty good about this. Let's try it. Okay,
Great.
great. So I have like probably 30 or 35 minutes now, right?
Yeah, I'd like to save some time for questions.
Okay.
We have another speaker coming to talk about DC fast chargers at 11. So, and then we have some other business. So yeah, if we could do 30, 35 minutes and keep some time for questions and discussion with you, that would be great.
That's about perfect. It's useful, I think, to hear a little bit about ICLEI, because we are a nonprofit organization, but it's kind of was founded or forged in this movement of local climate action, going back all the way to 1990, when there was an environmental crisis, facing the world, and leaders from around the world were like coming together to try to solve this crisis. So a little pop quiz here with this image on the screen as your hint. What was that crisis in 1990? Call it out.
Don't be shy. It's just been in the news again. It's improving.
Ozone.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. And we have some good news. And I think we can hold on to that good news to show that a global agreement can work. And so it was the hole in the ozone layer. Leaders, and when I say that, I mean presidents, prime minister, heads of state, gathering in New York City at UN headquarters to solve this problem. Unannounced and uninvited were another group of leaders that showed up. And these were mayors and council members and county commissioners, including from Westchester County in particular, but all over the US, coming to the UN to say, hey, presidents of the world, we're glad you're here, but the actions that you're going to need to take happen at the ground level. They happen in communities. So whatever you decide on, it's going to fall to us. And that's kind of remained the mantra of local environmental action over the past decade. That group or that gathering was called the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. They gave themselves that long name and then shortened it later to ICLEI. So it was a meeting. It wasn't a group. And then over the few years after that, became a nonprofit of these mayors that continue today. And not just mayors. I mean, now it's sustainability coordinators and energy managers, some of these roles that didn't really exist all that much back then. But that's who forms the core of ICLEI as a movement and an organization. We also were the kind of first nonprofit that served local governments. That we are for and by local governments. That's who our membership is. Cities, towns, and counties, but also specific to an issue area, and that was sustainability. And when we thought about it then, and even to today with these 5 pathways, we mean sustainability in a really comprehensive people, planet, prosperity, partnerships, etc. Kind of frame. And so distilled into these kind of 5 pathways here. We'll spend our time talking about this low emission, more and more no emission pathway, or even negative emission pathway. But we also work on nature, equity, climate adaptation and resilience, and then circular economy. This is a map of our ICLEI members. I just want to say that this part of the world, like the country especially, but even in the world, is a hotbed of climate leadership. Within ICLEI, outside of ICLEI, a lot of it driven by climate smart communities and really these forward thinking legislation that the state of New York. But the activity around sustainability predates, the Climate Act. In the Hudson Valley, you can see here, it's like 15%, I think, of our membership in the whole US is Hudson Valley. And there are like reasons for that. So given all of this and this kind of show of leadership, we still are facing a climate emergency. You all know that. And we talk in terms on this low emission side of things. We talk in terms of degree and more like point degrees. And this is why, because the Paris Agreement calls for limiting average warming to well below 2 degrees. That's what it says. And well below 2 degrees, what does that mean? We've come to adopt 1.5 degrees on average of global warming as like our goal. Can we get there? And it's because the devastation between 1.5 and 2 degrees is very different. You're seeing some of this on the screen. The thing that stands out, the metric that always like grabs me the most, I guess, is coral bleaching, because the difference between 1.5 degrees is like we still have coral reefs, and then 2 degrees we don't have any. And so next slide is, this is the takeaway from all of this, is every degree of warming matters. It matters in Australia's coral reefs or whatever. It really also matters here at home in Columbia County. So that's what's driving all of you to carrying an emissions inventory as your starting place. Like I said, New York State has the Climate Act, really ambitious goals, really nation leading goals, and still it's going to fall to our communities to implement them. We're also just now in a new kind of era of national leadership in the US. You all know the infrastructure bills, the example I'm using here, but we also have the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, infusion of money in the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant program. So this kind of flurry of money that can be used for climate, not all programs directed to climate, but up to our communities to help ensure that this like money flying around, one, makes it to rural communities, makes it to small towns, and then second, that every dollar is going to a highest climate purpose. I think I have hold on one second, my door, and I'll be right back. Sorry to run away for a second.
That this is the new age of virtual meetings where that happens. So the purpose of this, as we all know, is to make sure that we get into the nitty gritty of what it would look like to work on a community-wide greenhouse gas inventory and how we would do that. Okay. Cal, just for the sake of time, and this is great, keep going.
Yep.
we really want to focus in on like the nitty gritty of how we work together with eClay on a greenhouse gas inventory. This is great background and
Yep.
appreciate it because we often don't take the time to actually reflect back on the bigger picture like this. So just to make sure that we have time.
Yeah,
Sure.
let's jump into that then. And to say that we work on greenhouse gas day in and day out, but it's for a purpose that and couched in a context of a full climate planning cycle. It starts with that committing and mobilizing and the leadership part. You all have already achieved that step. This like step A at the top, and then now you're moved into this kind of assessment phase. We call it the analyzing phase or assessment phase of a climate process. We will focus on the mitigation, but that phase also can look at or should look at adaptation. You'll hear about a vulnerability assessment. That's the kind of baseline setting on adaptation. You may all be thinking about that. And then,
Just to interrupt, sorry, Cal,
yep.
and just to give you a little bit more background, we've launched with Cornell an adaptation plan, and we're in
Oh,
that.
great.
So
Okay.
we see that as the parallel or twin kind of to the action plan that we're hoping to talk about today with you.
Good. Great. And then equity. To just go back one, we have these kind of three pillars is the way that we think about climate action plans. Um, the equity is less standardized in what the baseline process is, but communities are actively, coming up with equity indicators and ways to kind of track that. Environmental justice on a number of levels. So let's get to the emissions inventory right now. There are two kind of tracks to emissions inventories. You will know this. One is this government operations track, and the other one is community wide. Both are complementary. You'll know that the government operations is a subset or like fits within a broader community inventory. It's really the sectors that you're looking at that would change. Here on this government one, it's a sample. I forgot. I think this is Hastings on Hudson. A third of it is buildings and facilities. About a third is this term water renewal, but it's like wastewater treatment. That profile changes depending on what kind of facilities you all own and operate. On the community side, here's an example. It's Cambridge, Massachusetts. So this big slice of the pie is commercial buildings. That's probably not the biggest slice of the pie, I would think, in Columbia. But these sectors are what you would consider on the community wide. So residential sector, all the housing, manufacturing, on-road transportation, cars and trucks, solid waste, water, wastewater. An important one for community-wide is agriculture. That typically is not showing up in too like urbanized of places. At least it's a tiny slice of the pie. In Colombia, agriculture sector would be bigger. And that when I say agriculture sector, it also includes forests, city trees, livestock, manure, lots of different considerations within that sector. New York statewide, here's a breakdown just to say it is an agricultural state, so about 6%. In a lot of counties of New York, that they tend to be similar to statewide in an emissions profile, but certainly Columbia might be over 10% in agriculture. That's what the inventory is helping you figure out. We think about inventories in terms of scope. This will not be new to many of you, but there are three scopes, the way that they're defined in the emissions protocols. What we would consider required in a standardized, an inventory that most communities pursue is the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Um, in the protocols, there are documents that standardize how this work is done. Those two scopes are required, and agricultural activities falls in scope 1. Scope 1 are like direct emissions coming out of um, the community, like use of energy, people driving their cars, in a community, all of that. Scope 1. Scope 2 is more nuanced, but by and large, it means transmission and delivery of energy. So it's kind of like spanning this gray area of direct use and then recognizing that energy is coming from somewhere else outside of Colombia. And then scope 3, not the basis of a standardized inventory. I think of it like the extra credit, but it's the like full systems emissions. The what like if you did a life cycle assessment of all the energy and the transportation, it's the embedded carbon in your buildings. It's the emissions associated with building a dam in Canada that's delivering energy. So a much bigger kind of picture of what's contributing to emissions on the ground. More and more communities are trying to get into those issues there. Let's spend a second talking about the work with ICLEI. We have this tool called Learn. It's free, so you can use it today, but it looks at emissions change over time related to trees. So forests and also city trees. So you pull 2 years, 2018 and 2022, and it'll show you parcel level data on if a forest tract turned to grassland, if it turned to like paving, and then it will give you estimated greenhouse gases associated with that change of land type. If we work more deep dive, we can get use GIS layers and get like much more refined than what you're getting in this Learn tool. So I just want to point that out. That's probably a route we would like to go, working together with the county. Great. I'll just touch on the adaptation and equity like in a minute each, or less. So you all are working with Cornell on an adaptation plan. The baseline assessment is the vulnerability assessment that begins with understanding the top hazards, climate hazards like heat and flooding, insect infestation. You all will decide what the hazards are for you. And then looking at community systems. So like energy, high school students, you can really define a community system in all sorts of ways, but you're wanting to kind of pair those top hazards with your priority systems to understand, okay, insect infestation, how is that impacting high school students, other neighborhoods around the community, natural areas and parks. So you kind of go through this iterative process, and then the adaptation plan you'll work on is the what are we doing about it kind of process. If you want examples of good vulnerability assessments, Hastings on Hudson released one. They worked with ICLEI on this last year, and it's very achievable. I think any community in New York could create this level of vulnerability assessment. New Paltz has a really good one. If you're looking for a super detailed, ambitious example, Rochester City has a good one. That's kind of like a next level. Hiring an expensive consultant, I think, is what they did to get that like street by street level of detail. And then on equity, minimally, you can think about this spectrum of community empowerment. I think I see some heads nodding. You've probably seen this. It comes out of the Movement Strategy Center, doing great work on assessing in a number of areas like communications and resource allocation, where your community falls on empowering all stakeholders. So I'll leave this with you all, but you can you want to move yourself to the right, right? You want to like get to a fully empowered state on a number of different fronts. Again, this is not a standardized approach. It's just a good one that cities are beginning to use. At that stage, your baselines are set. So like let's move into the discussion about inventory for sure. But then after you have your inventory, you're ready to create a climate action plan. And if we have some time after we talk inventory, we can look at some climate action plan related matters. But let's do some Q&A around inventory first.
Great. Are you ready for that, or are you going to prompt us? You ready for discussion questions?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Because I don't want to cut off if you had more to say.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I have more I can talk about just in the climate action plan stage, but I can go through that all now, or we can save it at the end after we
Let's
talk.
pause. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we have good amount of time.
Yep.
Let's open it up for questions. I mean, one of the questions I'll just throw out at the beginning is, what are the nuts and bolts of how we would engage? How we would work directly with eClay, and what are the different choices that we have in terms of how we might do, usually getting down to questions of cost, dollars, and also resources of time, from gathering data, understanding software, keeping this inventory updated over time. That's one of my primary questions.
Yep. Yeah. So there's two options. One is working through your membership. And so cities and counties join ICLEI as a member. Columbia is not yet a member, but joining is just paying a dues amount. All communities with populations under 100,000 pay $1,200 annually. So that would be $1,200 in dues. And for that membership model, where you're not paying anything more than that, you get our tools that let you do all of this inventory and modeling work. You get a technical advisor, so you'd have an actual person that is assigned to you to be on call, to train you, to meet with you whenever you need as you're working through creating your inventory. We have final report, inventory, presentation slide templates, all the step-by-step, so many step-by-step guidance. Every single sector has a video, that you're watching, and this kind of thing. So you get this kind of tools, resources, and technical advising as part of your membership. And then you do the process yourself. The other option is hiring ICLEI to do an inventory for you. That I'll just say quickly, if you want outright, you can say, ICLEI, create our inventory in a standard way, and that's a $5,000 flat fee. You can add on, to do the forest and trees, or other elements if you want. But generally speaking, there's the two tracks. You join ICLEI as a member, or you would get a project budget. The last thing I'd say is we will do joint fundraising too. Most of our communities we work with in New York are getting DEC grants, and then work with ICLEI through that grant-funded project.
Just a quick follow-up, the Climate Smart grants, which are a match, right, are eligible for this type of greenhouse gas inventories and action plans, right?
That is right. And I don't know if you'll know maybe better if the match has to be a dollar amount. I think you can just count your time.
Well, we'll look into that. I mean, that opens up, I think, in the spring, typically. Tara can advise us on that. Okay, let's open it up to questions. Other questions for Cal. Thank you for that, Cal. That was succinct and a lot of information. Steve.
Hey there, just want to see what do you estimate the time frame of this assessment would be? How long would it take?
Yeah. So, first, are you all thinking a government operations or a community-wide inventory, or both?
We're already doing a government operations
Mhm.
inventory, so that's happening, and that hopefully will provide some of the information that you need, or at least allow us to be familiar with what we need to do to work with you on
Mhm.
the community-wide one.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, let's say 5 months is like giving yourself plenty of time, if not active time. Like, this is not a 40-hour per week job. Um, 90% of that 5 months is just getting your data. Um, and so this is from the utility in New York. We have an online, database that you can search to get electricity data, natural gas data. Other data providers would be like a landfill operator, a wastewater treatment plant operator. The county may have transportation data. So you have let's say like 5 or 6 data providers that you're trying to get a calendar year of data for. Um, Ideally, all the same year. Say if you chose 2018, weeks. Sometimes it takes them 2 months. If you had it all on your desk today, you could do your inventory part as a part-time role in about 2 weeks. So it doesn't have to drag on and on. It's really about your data availability.
Great. And if the county joins, does each town have the ability to use the facilities that you have on the website?
Yeah. We so the county would be the ICLEI member. So our ICLEI team would communicate with a point person or a few people, but they would work for the county. But then the county could like give you their login to get into this ClearPath tool. Um, in some cases, we give like 1 or 2 extra logins to the county's account. What we won't do under the county membership is set up individual towns to each have their own inventory running in ClearPath. Um, Everyone would have to be contributing to this county, inventory.
Yeah.
How much time do you estimate it would take if we decided to go the path where, or the second option, where we hired eClay to really take the lead? Uh, and how much time? You said $5,000 more if we were going to get into more detail on land use change and perhaps agriculture. How, if like from the perspective of our climate smart coordinator and the volunteers that are part of this task force, how much time would we realistically be spending over the next 6 months or 12 months to support eClay in that effort?
Yeah, the kind of standard inventory without the forest and trees, we probably could do that in 2 or 3 months. We still need a county representative to request the data, but you can often say, "Hey, landfill operator, I'm connecting you to ICLEI. They're going to follow up with you." So there's that initial connection, and then if we get the data in pretty fast, it's faster for us just because we're day to day, doing the work. Um, Adding the forests and trees, I guess I would say like another month, probably of time.
Okay.
Yeah, costs. It wouldn't double the cost to do that, but it is a pretty involved process to do the forest piece.
And on land use change, forest trees, that's an interesting tool, the Learn tool. Um, what about assessing agriculture? What's a standard approach for doing that? I assume these are done through mapping and algorithms or formulas of some sort in terms of what types of farms. But how do you approach the agricultural part?
Yeah, some counties will, or even extension offices will track like heads of cattle in a county, pounds of manure that are spread, other fertilizers. So where we can get real data, as real as those places can get it, we'll use that. As we are going to like peer reviewed studies. We may look at a neighboring county that had good data. So using proxies and research to all agree that we have a medium, high, or higher degree of confidence in in the method that we're going to choose to do the estimation is kind of how that will go. Um, we use the National Land Use Database, so they're taking, like GIS overview pictures in cases of counties year over year, and so we can kind of estimate by viewing, when different land use types change. So it's kind of a combination approach, and that's why I said it's like a deeper dive process and can take some time. It's because of all those issues.
Great.
But just out of curiosity, how recent is that information? Because if we're talking about solar panel installations, replacing farmland, those things have happened in the last year or two.
Yeah,
So is that data available? Or I mean, and I think the example you gave earlier was 2018. So, you can get the same data for every year. So I'm just wondering if this is in real time or if it's going to be not stale, but older data.
I think it will be 2018, 2019 era. Those solar fields are not going to show up. But that's where your community like input, your knowledge can inform. So that we could know, maybe it's public, how many acres are covered in solar, and then we can bring that into the analysis.
Okay.
Other questions for Cal before we touch on the action planning?
I have one quick question. Here, let me undo my camera. So on the ag emissions, it's basically just doing nitrous oxide from fertilizer and then methane and nitrous oxide from cattle, right? You're not doing soil carbon or anything?
No, we haven't been. We did. That's not standard. I'll say that. Then we did a project with Phillipstown. That's where I'm down here in Putnam County, where we even worked with Vassar College to get core samples of the wetlands and measure the soil carbon. So it's possible to bring that in, but
Right.
we don't lean on it because it's not available
Right.
very
That's
many
a whole
places.
nother level of, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
I
curious.
think your farm had maybe some of that done, and we could use that as a proxy and say X% of Columbia County follows that soil profile, do something like
Right.
that.
Well, it takes, from my knowledge, I mean, my farm, we use Comet model to do it, and it's a lot more involved to actually model it based on practices. So the standard, just looking at how much, a standard amount of nitrous oxide from how much nitrogen fertilizer was added would be the simplest way to do that, right? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
And I just want to go back to Steve's question for a minute. I think 8 or 10 towns are doing their own greenhouse inventory. So in terms of accessing the materials, if the county were to purchase a membership and the towns wanted to access the materials, how are you saying there's only there could only be one modeling process, which would be the county's modeling process? So is there a limitation to what the towns would be able to access, is what I'm trying to understand?
Just in the tool itself. So this tool is called ClearPath,
Mhm.
and only a county email address is going to get the access to log in. They could share that email address with multiple people, the login information, but it's all going to be housed under the count, like it'll say Columbia account in ClearPath. So all those towns in Columbia County, there's one and only ClearPath account for every city and town in the U.S. And that's because we want to keep all this greenhouse gas and inventory data organized, no double counting, all this stuff for years and years to come. And so what the county would maybe do is like they're logging into their account and they're going to create a line item that's for, Hudson or Germantown or whatever. And they're going to like make these different line items, they will like we can't stop that. It's not what we want. If we're working individually with each community, we'd prefer them to be ICLEI members. Um, but the county representative using ClearPath could do that. The other thing is like our templates and our presentation slide decks. I mean, nothing's going to prevent someone from sharing that around. It's not like a very nice practice, but it's like that you all will have that information for sure.
Cal, have you, I mean, you've dealt with this issue of having different levels of government doing similar work that's overlapping. And, we do, as Supervisor Adams said, we do have towns that are further along and are doing community-wide inventories as well. How do these counties or these other larger government bodies typically deal with that overlap? I mean, does it make sense for the towns to continue to develop their own inventories if the county is doing something robust?
Yeah, it does make sense because the ultimate use of this inventory is to drive policy decisions. And there there are different decisions that you're going to make at the town level. So definitely operationally, like a government operations inventory, that's pretty useful for any town to do that. But even looking community wide, Germantown and Hudson, they're going to have different approaches, like different policies to pursue entirely.
Mhm.
So that's where it is useful. I think what we could do is the county serve as a regional hub. And then we are allowing, this is kind of a new thing, the hub to purchase subscriptions, ICLEI subscriptions is what we're calling it, for $500 a piece for each of their towns. So it's not like the full $1,200 membership for everyone. And then it has to like go through the county to purchase these subscriptions. But then you essentially get all the benefits directly for each town.
Okay, that's a good answer. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
In
helpful.
that case, we would let each town have its own account in ClearPath too.
Okay. Let's talk briefly, and I don't want to cut off questions, so if you have questions, raise your hand, of course, but let's talk about the action planning. What happens after you've got your inventory, but ready to plan? Can you describe that process and how we might engage in that?
Yep. I'll get my screen back up because there are some modeling visuals that help you. I'll let you read that later. Let me skip ahead. I'll come back to that slide here. So this one right here. So when you have your emissions profile, your inventory in the ClearPath tool, there are next level sections of the tool that let you forecast emissions change over time. So you would forecast from your actual inventory, you're forecasting out to 2030, out to 2050. What are the projected emissions changes driven by population change, by the New York State grid getting cleaner over time. All of those factors are layered into your emissions trajectory. At that stage, you've got a forecast. So then you are ready to plan. And that's like, say you want to add a mile of bike lane. You want to run a solarized campaign in a neighborhood. There's 100 actions that you can model in ClearPath where you're layering them onto your forecast to ratchet down that emissions over time. ICLEI, as a member benefit, will model the high impact actions. They're listed here on the left. So that's like the solar, usually it's solar, but the number of megawatts that would need to be part of the grid to reach your science-based target. Building electrification, electric vehicle transition, those are all considered what we call high impact. And then you can see supporting actions are like compost programs, nature-based solutions, circular economy. what it ends up looking like is a visual like this. We call it a wedge analysis, but it's that ratcheting down. So like every action you would choose is a chunk of your emissions profile that you're getting rid of. And so that's like an iterative process. You're going to talk about all the different combinations of your actions and land on one that is feasible. You have the staff to do, you've got the budget, or you can fundraise for. And so ultimately that set makes it into your climate plan. Let me see. And then we help you put together the what we call an implementation strategy or profile. It's essentially the who, what, where, when, why, and how of doing the plan. And we got all kinds of good examples for how to put that together. I think, yeah, this one's out of Milwaukee, Oregon. There is a Milwaukee, Oregon, but I really like that the way they structure this in their climate plan, where they've got the action, the like who's going to do it, which department, what's the time scale, and you can see here they're not putting a dollar amount. They're not putting like number of months. They're being more general of like a high, medium, low. So you know, minimally you can go that route, and then if you can get more refined and cost out every action, all the better. The-
How often do these action planning processes involve stakeholder input from the community and a process for putting out ideas and getting feedback to help shape the selection of actions?
yeah, they always should. It varies wildly how deep communities go in getting that information, but you should be taking your multiple scenarios to your community members and having people kind of deliberate on the combination of actions that you want. Someone at my door. Sorry, I have some plumbing issues, so I'll be right back.
Better get that fixed before the deep freeze sets in. Okay, well, this is food for thought. We're not going to have a lot of time today to discuss the next steps. We're going to get more information on a different topic starting in 15 minutes. So, let's spend the next 15 minutes with questions or observations that Cal can help reflect on or provide additional color on in terms of moving forward with something like this. Or this will be a discussion we'll bring up at the next meeting to figure out what the next steps are and what recommendations this task force would want to make regarding going down this path of broader inventory. Okay, Cal. So
Yep.
thanks. By all means, if you had anything else to add on action planning, this is a good overview on both inventory and action planning. Really appreciate it. We have some time now. We're going to pick up this conversation and have a discussion at our next meeting where we decide what the path, what our recommendation would be for the Board of Supervisors, if any, on moving forward. So I just want to reserve this time to maybe initiate that discussion if folks have any additional questions or thoughts on how we would move forward. It seems like there are two paths here, and just raise your hand or speak up. We could go our own path, and that would put a lot more pressure and on our coordinator and on the volunteers on this task force, or we could try to use some of the money that we've raised from the Solarize campaign, from the heat pump campaign. I am not sure if all of that money would be eligible for this, so that's a question. Whether we could direct it towards hiring eClay to do this work, and or we could apply for a DEC grant this summer to fund the work. Tara, just a note that the CSC grants do consider in-kind staff time as a match. So that was what Cal had said, which is great, meaning that we wouldn't necessarily, it would be significant time. So I think we could probably get a cash or a lower amount for the match.
But I think that would also be the conversation that we'd have to have with department heads to see about the availability of staff time.
Right. And really, I mean, I think one of the questions I can foresee coming up, is, in either case, uh, particularly if we go the first route, but even if we do hire eClay, is how much time are we really looking at for different departments? That's always going to be the first question. How much staff time, if any, are we looking at? What additional burden does this represent for Columbia County staff in the different departments? And getting as precise an answer as we can on that would be really helpful in a proposal for us to consider. Tistria.
Hi, I'm just
Hi.
wondering if we're going to have an opportunity to talk as a task force without Kale present. No offense, Kale, it's not anything personal, but if there was something that I wanted to ask that I didn't feel comfortable having in front of the
Yeah.
vendor.
Of course.
I don't know if the time is now, but I just want to make sure that we have that time at some point.
Well, let's see. We have a few minutes and we can use this time. I was envisioning this as really informational so we could digest it and then have that discussion at our next meeting and do any kind of follow-up in preparation of that meeting. Additional questions for Cal, specific questions that we could have at the ready. But if there are no other questions for Cal, and Cal, if you don't have anything else that is pertinent right now, we can use the next 10 minutes. Okay. So Cal, I want to say thank you, a big thank you, because this is a lot of information in a short period of time, and we appreciate eClay, we appreciate you, and I'm happy that we finally we've gotten this far after 3 years of talking about this. So we'll be in touch soon, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. It was so nice to meet you all. And regardless of your decision, this is like a partnership we're all involved in the Hudson Valley. So I know we'll be in touch regardless. So if you don't choose to go with ICLEI, totally fine. And let's just keep each other informed of everything going on.
Thanks so much,
Have a
Cal.
good day.
Have a good day. Okay, Tistria.
Yeah.
Floor is yours.
So I think the idea is wonderful, and I'm just wondering if we can look at different options to get the same services. So New Lebanon has been very successful in getting these types of things completed with our relationship with Cornell. And so we've had many studies very similar to what he's offering done at no charge to the town. And we have a great relationship with Cornell University. I know Jennifer Phillips now is on our committee and has a connection with Bard University or Bard College. And I believe there's interns and students there. And I think actually Cole mentioned he went to Bard. That's what brought him to the area. So I'm just wondering, if we could really explore some potential collaboration options that don't cost money, as opposed to contracting with a professional service that at the end of the day will likely get us what we're looking for at no cost, and also work to build that relationship. It's been a real benefit to New Lebanon. After we did our first project, then Cornell was basically like, we want to do more. What do you have next for us? And we sat down and said, okay, here's what we're looking for, and mentioned 10 things, and they connected us with different professors. So I'm wondering if we can look at that avenue first.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a matter of cost, dollars spent. It's a matter of time, of volunteers and staff as an in-kind cost, and it's also a matter of the tool or the tools that were offered to have a framework like the software platform ClearPath that we can use, we can update, we can continue to work with, or if it's kind of a one-off. Those would be the questions in comparison that I would want to know, and there's probably others. Tistra, could you maybe initiate with your contacts at Cornell who you've worked with on this, an email with me, and if anyone else is interested in joining to explore that? And Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, so I did have a conversation with Kale about this a couple of weeks ago when I learned that we were going to get him to present to us today. And he teaches for us right now. He's teaching a course in the spring that's basically sort of a practicum So he's actually working with a set of students in the climate science program who climate science and policy to work with Ulster County on a project, but it's certainly not a whole greenhouse gas inventory because that is a substantial lift. So what I was asking him about was whether or not he could mentor an intern, because all of our grad students have to do a 4 to 5 month internship in the first year of the program, second year of the program. But the thing is, he said, yes, of course, but we do want our students to be able to get paid for their internships because it's hard for them to do work for free. And he said ICLEI doesn't have internships, so they wouldn't pay him. And he said if the county came up with money to help him, then ICLEI could, we could work something like that out. So, and he also indicated that next year he is interested in maybe doing some kind of a student practicum project with our grad students with Columbia County next year instead of Ulster, or in addition to Ulster. But that's all a little bit vague. So it's what you're talking about with Cornell, if that's free, that could be a different route. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily get one of our students involved, but it would probably just be connecting to something that the county is already engaging, rather than them. And I don't have the expertise to lead something like this. I just haven't. So Kale would be the one to do it. But again, it's not for free. So
Thanks. Tishri, quick question. That the inventory that you're talking about that New Lebanon did with Cornell, is that a comprehensive community greenhouse gas inventory? Was that a government operations inventory? Did they use a software platform that allows you to update, regularly?
Yeah, I'm actually going to defer to Steve. He's the one that worked with Cornell, and I'm not sure what studies we have done. We have done numerous, and I have them written down, but they're not on the top of my head, and he's the one that has them in his head. So I'm going to defer to Steve.
Okay, thanks.
Oh.
The greenhouse gas inventory was actually done in association with CDRPC. They came up with, we were, I think, one of the first in the county to get an inventory. The projects that we're working with Cornell, we are basically set for this semester, so we could approach it for the fall. I think that they don't have a lot of leeway in terms of what they were doing, so
Okay.
we can again look at that in the fall.
Okay. Tara, if you're on, what are the differences between the inventory that CDRPC can offer, community-wide, and what ICLEI does?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's for those of you that are familiar with the government operations template that exists that we're working with communities on. It's basically an Excel template. It's a very similar model, except for we're dumping in data from the state's kind of utility energy registry. So it's not going to go as far as like the agricultural and the forest cover. Like, we just don't have the tool for that. Ideally in the future, something we'd like to develop. But the one that we did with New Lebanon and our consultant Climate Action Associates, Jim Yanger, who actually used to be the technical expert at ICLEI. So he's very familiar with all of this kind of infrastructure, except for it's not as kind of, I guess, user friendly, is basically that, and it does require, we can support it. It does require kind of, I would say, things. So whereas ICLEI is proposing a service that they're kind of going to almost kind of give to you and do for you, this is going to be a bit more kind of get in the trenches, I would say. And again, it's not going to have that long-term capability. It is updatable. So, I mean, it is an Excel file. So you guys want to go in there again in 5 years and use the same thing, definitely manageable. Someone would need to know, obviously we'll be here hopefully based on state contracts and grants, but someone will need to know kind of the emissions grid factors and how to get into the UER. The beautiful thing that I can think of right now is that the UER is really trying to make themselves more user friendly. if you don't know what I'm talking about, the UER, so that's basically the Public Service Commission said all the utilities need to make your data publicly available. So people need to be able to see what communities are using. The website right now is just not super user friendly. It's for technical folks, but they're trying to make that more accessible so that anybody can kind of understand that data and pull it out. And that is the bulk of your community inventory. The other piece of it is going to be your fuel use and your transportation, which all needs to happen kind of in a different modeling way, but that's the bulk of it. So
That's great. Now, one other question on using funds. So an update for later I'll do now, which is we've had the Heat Smart.
as a consultant to do their community
Okay, so,
inventory.
so I understand. I know that the corporations piece is going to be unique to each municipality, the county and the towns and the villages. But if we were to do the larger community piece for the county, wouldn't that include all the towns and villages? So that's really a very different animal, because then we'd have to have the data from each of the towns to put into that piece, correct? Or am I misunderstanding?
It would overlap. So
Okay.
you're looking at, yeah. So I mean, that's the way that it makes sense to do it. It's very basically you're doing the county inventory and then you're kind of like piecing off each town. The villages would obviously be pieced off too, but you know, you're kind of just that data all is in one place. You analyze it all at once in essence. And instead of just saying this is all Columbia County, you're saying, well, this is all Columbia County of Canaan. This is, you know, it overlaps, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm just thinking about reading the reports at the end of the day and how to understand what those nuances are. Um, uh, and this is a little bit above my pay grade, so forgive me for asking an amateur question, but I'm just trying to get a
Yeah.
good picture here.
I would recommend, Brenda, looking at the 2010 regional inventory that was done. I can send that out. We basically, it kind of does just that. It takes the county, it really analyzes the county data, but then it does break it down into towns as well, and kind of less metrics. You know, there's less kind of pulled out of it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to pause this conversation. It was good, robust, to be continued, and we have some follow-up, which we can do for next meeting. And I just wanted to see if Will is on yet. Let me just check my email. Okay. Nothing here. Let me, nothing yet. Okay, so Will up while we're waiting for him. Will DeRuve is with Livingston Energy Group, which is out of, I think it's out of Saratoga. It may be Schenectady, so we'll clarify that. But it's a local organization, that company that develops charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. And our goal here is to just learn more, very similarly, learn more about what they have to offer and how that might be helpful in us developing a plan for getting one or more additional fast chargers, non-Tesla fast chargers in the county. Again, there are grants that will become available almost certainly. Last year there was a zero emission vehicle grant that came and went. So there's a lot of potential for funding. And then there's an opportunity for kind of public-private partnerships between, well, with Livingston Energy potentially, and also with host sites and other businesses to figure this out. So I am going to just quickly, oh, there, no, okay. Well, are we on yet? All right, let me send a quick email here. Okay, I think he's joining in about, we will cover some other ground right now and get some other business out of the way, and then we'll get back to that. So the heat pump campaign, we have barely launched the campaign, meaning that we haven't really done any outreach other than our website. We're planning that. And we were informed by Christina at the Capital Region Heat Smart organization that we're working with that we've passed the threshold for the number of folks in the county who have actually implemented an upgrade. So we, Wendy, thank you, have submitted to NYSERDA for the grant, and we are just getting the campaign going. So it doesn't stop us from doing all the work, but that's good news. We have a committee that's working on this, and Terrence, Steve, and Matthew, and Wendy, and Christina. And we are planning an event, which will be a virtual event, an informational event for the end of February. We have not yet set the date. It's one of 2 days that we're working with. And Matthew is working on press release, and we have put together what we think is the contact list that we have from a few different lists, which I sent out actually to in my email yesterday. We would really appreciate it if folks could look at that list and make sure that we're not missing anyone. You know, I'll look through and make sure we've got every EMC member. We're going to communicate this out to the towns so that they have the opportunity to publicize it. And we have a flyer, electronic flyer, and a social media banner as well that folks can use as we get this out there. We're just promoting an event, essentially an educational event, which will be on Zoom with RICOR and one of the other providers to educate people. We are also planning on some in-person meetings this year, and we haven't set them yet, but we're looking for maybe one at the Rojan Library and one up in the Kinderhook, Valatia area, ideally in a place where people can see the some of the technology in action. What else? Just kind of zooming through that to cover that. Is there anything else from the committee, Matthew?
Did we, Christina asked us if we could choose a date. Do we want to take a survey? I think the two options were the 21st, February 21st, or February 28th. And that would be RICOR and I think Radiant Store was the other vendor. Tuesday the 21st or Tuesday the 28th at 6:30. I don't know if anyone has a preference. Maybe the later date is better.
The 21st may be difficult because it's the day after a holiday weekend. So people are just a holiday for most people. And I don't know when the schools take their break. Are schools on break that week because it's President's Week?
Good question. I don't know. I was opting for the 28th anyway because it just give us more time to promote.
Yeah.
Well, unless there's some objection, that makes a lot of sense, what Brenda said, and gives us more time. So let's do the 28th. You'll get some information. You can put it down in your calendars. There's no need, you don't have to join this, obviously. We're not looking for everyone from the task force to join, but obviously if you're curious, but we will ask for you to help us promote it through your channels. So we'll be sending out an email in the next week with the information so that it's easy for you to do that. And then just please get back to me, just a reminder, on the contact list if there's anything missing. That's a list we want to have now. We want to build for the future for other events as well. So it's a very important resource for us. Go ahead, Matthew.
Okay. So then I'll just tell Christina to tell the vendors that the 28th, February 28th seems to be the date.
Yeah, let's communicate that to Christina, and then we're going to get that press release out.
Yep.
Any other comments or thoughts on that? We're kind of going quickly, but we're continuing to work in the background. Really, it's about these events, good partners and installers with Christina, and hopefully a lot of people take advantage. I see that. So nothing else on Heat Smart. We'll move forward. That's really the meaty part of the agenda, other than there's a few other little things we can do at the end. But I see Will has joined us maybe a couple minutes early. Will, are you there?
I'm here, sir.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we're gonna start early because you're here early, which is great. And we have about 45 minutes. We'd like to reserve some time for questions and make this informative, but also an opportunity to really discuss what it is that you're presenting. I think without any further delay, we'll turn it over.
Okay. Now, can I share my screen?
You should be able to. Let us know if you can't, and we'll help you out.
Should be able to.
Should be the bottom arrow up. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Good.
So as an introduction, everybody, my name is Will DeRuve. I am the Vice President of North American Sales for Livingston Energy Group. We are a company based right here in Schenectady, and we specialize in EV charging stations for obviously the private sector as well as the public sector. So we have done tons and tons of work throughout the state of New York, and are now doing lots of work throughout the Northeast. We got started back in 2016 doing projects like this, and have done everything from level 2 or kind of slower charging all the way to what's called a DC fast charger, or a supercharger, a fast charge system. We're now starting to do projects all throughout the country. And with recent awards like a GSA blanket purchase agreement, so now we're doing lots of federal government work with the Department of Defense and Department of Agriculture and Interior. So they're now contracting with us to help electrify their fleets. So we are now starting to do just lots and lots of stuff all over the country. And after talking with Dave about Columbia County, he thought it would be a good opportunity to just introduce you guys to myself and our company to talk about bringing charging stations to the county. So I'll get into a little bit about what we actually offer here, right? Unlike most charging station companies, I'm sure you guys have all heard the ChargePoint name at some point. They have been around a very long time. They are traditionally just a hardware and software company, right? You go buy their equipment, you have to contract an installer to go do it. And then all of the funding mechanisms that exist in the state of New York, you have to now go do on your own. Livingston Energy is a full turnkey deployment company, right? So we source all of the hardware for you guys based on what you need. We complete the install for you. So we do all of the install work and communicating with utilities and permitting work. And then all of the funding that exists through currently right now in the state of New York called utility make-ready programs, my team actually will go and secure for you guys. So this is really beneficial when we get things like Sourcewell awarded contracts. So we have a Sourcewell contract that allows most of the public sector work we've done with cities and counties and municipalities has gone through Sourcewell. So the whole process can be done through Sourcewell, which makes the procurement really simple and easy to do. But you don't get to find companies that have the hardware, do the install, and have developed and own the software piece as well. So we do the entire thing from A to Z. Ultimately, a lot of my customers will say, this is where I want them, take care of it, and let me know how much it's going to cost. It can be that simple. We can get as involved as you need to, doing some very large projects with the city of Rochester, did a bunch with the city of Amsterdam recently, and obviously city of Schenectady we've been working with for a very long time. So we've been doing this for a while. It's interesting because when you talk to companies like ChargePoint, right, they have their set of products. Livingston is very what's called brand agnostic, where ultimately I carry 500 different models of charging stations, and a lot of what I do is consulting with the area or the customer to find out what the result needs to be at that site, and that's what helps us decide what piece of equipment to put on the ground. So I carry lots of different stuff. The picture on the left hand of your screen is a Tritium DC fast charger. When we're looking at DC fast chargers or superchargers, we tend to push people towards Tritium products. They are by far the most reliable in the industry, and they're not inexpensive, but you don't have to worry about having to go fix them all the time. They are now being made in America in Tennessee, which is fantastic. But again, it's a lot of communicating with your team to figure out what you guys want, what the results of doing this need to be, and marrying you with a solution that makes some sense. And feel free to stop me at any time, guys. I'm going to get through this quick and open it up, and we'll have a conversation. So just to give you an example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Crossgates Mall. We've got something like 25 stations over there. So we've done tons of commercial lots. I mean, more multi-unit residential buildings than I can count. We've done a bunch of on-street parking in city of Cohoes and city of Amsterdam, as well as we're now starting to do like a service station model. So more of like a gas station that has charging stations on it, and are working with quite a few fleets here in the Northeast, and actually quite a few in the state of Texas right now to electrify their bus fleets. So we've done just about everything you could do. Like I was telling you guys, we're based right here in Schenectady. When I got started here, we had about 25 employees. We are going to be at about 125 here in the next couple of months. And I got started in January of last year. So we're growing exponentially at this point. We have about 2,000 stations active and in the ground right now. And we have about 5,000 more that are in construction as we speak. We currently right now are the second largest network, so the software system as far as its size. We're the second largest one in the state of New York. We're actually the 8th largest one in the entire country.
Will,
So we're doing something right.
I'm just going to ask a question back to the slide before, which
Sure.
is you gave some examples. I think that would be really helpful for everyone to understand how a deal comes together and who's paying for what.
Sure.
So first you said, that you do much more than most charging companies. You have software, you have hardware, and you also help figure out funding sources. That's very, very key here. The county doesn't have an appetite to want to spend much, if anything, on this. It wants to make it kind of a neutral exercise. We're trying to facilitate it, whether it's public, private, whether it's private, but we're trying to facilitate the bringing that charger or multiple chargers to the county. Maybe you can use some of these examples here to
I could run through them right now. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like city of Amsterdam, who had something like 52 charge point stations in the ground that they got for free years ago. They got a bill in the mail all of a sudden, and it was for something like $150,000 for the software system that operates on those stations. They do not have it in their budget to operate those stations. So Mayor Cinquani called me and said, "Will, I need you to help." So we actually went and replaced all of those stations. And instead of the city of Amsterdam actually owning and operating them, we offered to do it entirely for free, and we'll own and operate and collect the little bit of revenue on drivers passing through. So we have the purchase business model. If you guys wanted to own the site and actually collect revenue generated on the site, if you guys are really not interested in that option at all, we can do an owner operator model where Livingston would be the investor on the site. And obviously whatever revenue would be generated at that site, we would collect to offset my investment. So I've got lots of different things. I have some customers who will actually split the upfront investment with me and we can split revenue. But again, if it doesn't fit into your budget for this year or next year or 3 years from now, then we can still get it in the ground and ultimately with the help of the utility make readies, not terrible. Obviously, our operating budget sometimes is easier to work with than maybe your guys's as you're dealing with lots of things going on. Generally, we'll do something like a 4 or 5 year, we would own and operate and then give you guys an option to take ownership of it. And you don't have to, but we like to give you guys an option if you wanted to. So
Great.
lots of different business models, right? You guys, obviously, we can go through a purchase model. Generally, when I work with municipalities, I'll give them both options so that they can look at it. But ultimately, if you guys are not interested in owning and operating a site, we would be willing to make an investment in Columbia County to make that happen.
Supervisor Adams.
So are there economies of scale associated with that? I'm sure with Amsterdam, did you have multiple locations and multiple sizes of arrays? How would you decide what makes sense in terms of a business model and what wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, economies of scale definitely come into play. Generally, I'm not doing owner operator models when it's like one dual port station. Generally, I look to do something like 5 to 10 at a given location. City of Amsterdam, worked out a little differently. They had something like 5 locations with different amounts at each one. And ultimately, we are just firm believers that over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, the amount of electric vehicles driving around is going to go up pretty dramatically. So we do see it as a profit-making center at some point, even if the first 3 years might not be. We do see that money coming back to us and ultimately, making a couple of dollars at the site at some point. So generally, yes, I am looking to put more than workstations into the ground. Hopefully something like 5 to 10. I have done some where there are 50. So we can go as big or, as small as is reasonable to have us take a look at it. But generally, one of the keys to doing projects like this is the utility will fund every plug that goes into the ground equally. My install cost generally doesn't go up in the same way as their incentives do. So generally, the more projects, the more stations I can put in the ground, generally my CapEx actually comes down. So there's a little bit of kind of figuring out what my available power is at each site and my space and what the traffic's going to look like. So ultimately, I think we would work with you guys to figure out where in an ideal situation you guys would want them. And then we can kind of figure out what we can do there and how we make it work.
Along those lines, Will, can you provide us with any assistance in identifying optimal locations?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I do a lot of the time. So New Jersey Transit has reached out to me. I'm doing a fairly large project for New Jersey Transit and identifying, the good train stops and the bad train stops where this will make some sense. So we've got some software and some data along the lines of like traffic patterns and where EVs are driving to have it make some sense. But again, I think there's this blend of finding where the cars are driving and then ultimately for municipalities and counties especially where the potential economic impact will have the best impact on the area. Like where can I put them where I'm going to get people to stop off of a major road and potentially stop for an hour or two and spend some money in the city or in the town. So we try to figure out where there's a happy marriage between a county or municipality we're dealing with and where it would be ideal for us. They don't always mirror each other. So we try to find where it makes some sense for everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Keep going.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Supervisor Adams.
And I don't want to get too granular, but we have a truck stop in town just off of I-90, and which does a large volume of business. Would you work with them to determine the number of units that might be practical and what federal or state funding they might get to help underwrite those costs?
Yeah, so truck stops especially, probably don't lend itself to level 2 charging stations, right? Generally, that business model is get in and get out. So we would lean more towards a DC fast charger or level 3 charger. And with the NEVI money that is coming, NYSERDA has a program going on in Western New York right now for Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo that we're working with them on for DC fast chargers. But once the NEVI money comes, it will pretty much hit I-90. I'm not sure if like the Taconic is going to be a part of this first phase. We'll have to take a look at how they've mapped out the first phase. I think it's mostly 87 and 90, but phase 2 has the Taconic built into that as well. So ultimately we can figure out what that location looks like, what the investment point would look like. And again, I assume that the truck stop is probably privately owned, or is it owned by the county?
It's privately owned, but what's interesting to me is that it has a Dunkin' Donuts, a Subway, a dog park. So
Yep.
the residential gas side and the residential use, or not residential, but individual, is much higher than I would have ever expected.
And again, the incentives from the utility on DC fast charger are pretty hefty. So generally the upfront costs after all of the incentives are factored in to a private business owner, plus a bunch of tax breaks they get for doing this, it's not terribly expensive. And I have some good tools to show them what ROIs look like based on the area. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody you guys can connect me with on the private side to help bring it to them. And again, that doesn't mean we're going to take the owner operator model off the table. We're willing to do that wherever it makes sense. But I think the private sector, most of them actually like to own charging stations. We would be the back end support to manage the site and make sure everything's going right and be the maintenance arm. But ultimately the revenues generated on that site would go to that private business. And I think most of them that I talk to, do want to own charging stations. So we can certainly work that out.
How easy is it to predict the demand charge costs? I mean, you have models that I'm sure are very sophisticated to figure out, what the risk is and what the thresholds are for use that make something feasible. How can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so New York has some pretty stiff demand charges when it comes to DC fast chargers. Public Service Commission actually just released about 2 weeks ago a plan they are expecting to put in place to remove demand charges for DC fast chargers. So that's on the table now. With the objection of all the utilities, but everybody else is saying this is a great idea. All the utilities say it's a horrible idea. This is what I do a lot with Stewart's, actually. So Stewart's brings tons of power to their new gas stations, and a couple of their sites have some limited power capabilities. So you use systems that have like battery integrated systems on them so that the pull off of the grid is not so bad, and the charge is actually supplemented by a fairly large battery, and that will offset demand charges. I can help predict. I can tell you when the demand charge is going to turn on. I can tell you how much it's going to cost you. What I can't always predict is how frequently people are going to come. What's difficult with DC fast chargers right now is, let's say 2 people at the same time come on one given instance and charge at the same time. It's going to spike your peak demand. If nobody else ever comes for the rest of the year, you're going to hold that peak demand charge for the rest of the year. So that's the scary part when we start looking at DC fast chargers, right? You need to make sure there's going to be people coming and using it, which is why truck stops and gas stations make a lot of sense, because they get a lot of traffic, park and rides, things like that, common areas where people go to a lot. Those sites make a lot of sense. I don't generally put them in like multi-unit apartment complexes.
Right.
So it's a little bit about site evaluation and traffic identification. And then coming up with a solution, and ultimately with the person who is operating this on their site being very transparent as to what may or may not happen.
No, thank you. I think you may have answered this briefly, and perhaps this is on the website because I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the different models, the ownership and the split revenue, you have something on your website that gets into the nitty gritty, the details of that, the difference between the two?
Our website is kind of vague, but after this, I could probably send Dave, some literature that we have outside of the website, because we don't offer a lot of this stuff to everybody. We don't necessarily love broadcasting that we will own and operate, because that's the only phone call we'll ever get. So you know,
Of
I
course.
can send Dave to distribute to you guys kind of our business model options here, and that will break out some information, right? If we're gonna do a 90-10 revenue split, generally, if we're gonna split it that way, 90 comes to Livingston, 10% goes to site host. That just means the CapEx, they're gonna pay the 10%, we'll pay the 90. So generally it's an even split based on what our split on CapEx is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You got it. Okay. So I went through this one just to give you guys a concept, right? This is why we are so busy right now, right? Between the state of California and New York, there's even more now, but this was as of like a year ago. There is about $4.2 billion worth of government funding going towards projects like this. So huge amounts of money. The federal government is begging people, and the state of New York and the state of California are begging people to go do this, and they will pay. We have worked through just about every state that has an incentive program. Some are easier to deal with than others, but we have never had an issue actually getting money out of these utilities to help fund these projects. And there's no shortage of it. I know the federal government alone for their own fleet, which I'm working with now, has something like $150 billion worth of money that they're putting into not only to electrify the fleet, but provide charging stations for that fleet. So tons of money, and ultimately bringing down the upfront cost for just about everybody to capitalize on it. This is a slide I always like to show. You know, everybody thinks it's too early. What I will tell you, according to the Alternative Fuels Data Center in the federal government, is that 96% of the chargers that need to get built over the next 5 years have not been built yet. You guys might think that there's chargers everywhere and it's as easy. If GM is going to move the entire line to electric over the next handful of years, I assure you that there are quite a few more chargers that need to get built. And that's ultimately where we start to fit into this marketplace. And just to give you a concept, this is ultimately one contracts or are approved to do work in. Obviously, historically, we have focused right up in here. We just won a very large bid for Broward County in Florida for 160 stations. So you'll start seeing pins go on our like software system, right? When you look to where charging stations are, you will start seeing them all through Texas and Florida and through the South, and lots going on the West Coast. This side of the country is a little slower to get into this adoption, but they're coming along. And obviously we have that Sourcewell contract and then the GSA contract as well. I can get into like different models of chargers if you guys are interested to. I think that might be a little overkill for everybody. We have a station that we actually manufacture right here in Schenectady as well. This is a level 2 charger that the federal government buys now regularly. So we're doing lots of interesting stuff right in your guys' backyard. I think it's great for the state of New York, trying to keep New York money within New York. We just won a New York Power Authority contract as well. So we're doing some interesting stuff. We can talk about local load management. Ultimately, this is a feature in our software system that allows us to run lots of charging stations on limited loads. So when we're talking about major upgrades of infrastructure, which are very expensive, we can ultimately set the site to whatever's available at the panel today. So if there's only 80 amps available and they want 4 chargers, we can evenly spread that out across all 4 chargers and ultimately still not have to do very large infrastructure upgrades. So a lot of my we did Van Patten Golf Course, which is right here in Clifton Park. We did 52 stations there. Obviously, we don't have those stations running at full bore most of the time because those guys are there for 4 hours. So we don't need to deliver tons of power immediately to the car. We can actually slowly charge it over a given period of time. So this kind of technology makes it really easy to do. The utilities love it because they don't have to run power all over the place and replace transformers. So things like this are what is starting to catch some attention of some big people in California. And, we're doing it every day. Again, we could talk about different types of chargers. I think if we're doing DC fast chargers, I would really especially if we're going to own and operate, it's more than likely 99% of the time going to be a Tritium product, right? We have a great relationship with Tritium. They make an incredible product that's really easy to maintain and fix and comes with the best warranties on the planet, and is priced really competitively. We like the team there. We like where it's made. So generally, you'll look at something like this. This is what is called a Tritium RTM 75. Again, it's going to charge a vehicle in something like 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on the vehicle.
Supervisor Adams.
Um, One of the things that we ran into with the community solar campaign was something that my company used to call the bleeding edge of innovation. How, if we're rolling out all these charges, do we know that New York State's infrastructure will support this as the capacity, or can support this rollout?
Yeah, I think the state will give you one answer. Some utilities will give you a different one. So I will tell you that National Grid, Central Hudson, and NYSEG, RG&E are fully committed to, upgrading service when and where needed, and believe it or not, have plenty of capacity to actually deliver this kind of power. What they're struggling with is the manpower sometimes to bring it to the location. So when I'm dropping 480 volts of power to power a DC charger, there are times where I've had to wait 6 months for the utility to actually deliver it. They know that they can, they're short on manpower and sometimes short on like a transformer to actually electrify it, if that makes sense. So they have capacity. The state of New York is actually pretty good when it comes to infrastructure. When I'm on states like Louisiana and Georgia, it's not so great and it's way more difficult. The state of New York is actually in pretty good shape when it comes to and everybody, you'll hear different things, but based on my experience with the utilities, they're actually in pretty good shape. There are always little pockets where, it's major work to bring that kind of power there. And ultimately, it just means generally we just will avoid those areas for now. So I would say as of right now, probably 85% of the infrastructure in the state of New York is good to go. There's going to be 15% where the site just doesn't make any sense, and the cost from the utility to bring the service there is more money than anybody's going to want to spend.
Thank you.
Of course.
Will, can you share this after? Can you share this
Absolutely.
presentation?
Absolutely. So again, we carry some other products as well from like BTC Power based in California. This is a more like for a truck stop model. If you had a private sector customer who wanted, interesting screens on things to interact with drivers, we carry products like this as well. ABB obviously makes, great chargers. They tend to be kind of expensive and aren't actually as reliable as the Tritium stuff. But just to give you guys a concept of all the types of chargers we do and install on a given day. When I was talking to you about that battery integrated systems, this is what I'm working on for a Stewart's location in Glenmont. Again, this is right to Supervisor Adams's question about reliability of the grid. The location for the Glenmont store has no available power. And the only way that Stewart's is able to build this gas station, according to the town of Glenmont, is there has to be EV charging stations there, or else they won't let them build. So now Stewart's is caught in between this place of, well, we have to do it, but there's not enough power to satisfy what we have to do. So this product now comes into play where there's now a battery system. I don't have to take so much power off the grid. And now everybody seems to be happy. So you'll start seeing these pop up a lot probably in the near future, especially in states where there's not enough generation of power to make it make sense. You'll start seeing battery integrated systems to allow people to put chargers down without major overhauls of the utility. Again, we can get really deep into products and stuff if you wanted.
Well, it's really fascinating. If there's anything else other than the products that you want to touch on, that would be helpful, that you think would be relevant. And then my kind of wrap up question, and of course there may be others, is next steps. How can we move this conversation forward to get more information on what would be viable options? We are coming as a advisory body of the Board of Supervisors to explore if there are ways that we can bring DC fast chargers, and we are, I think I'll speak, my perspective is we're agnostic as to the ownership model, but we are concerned about some of the early experiences that our towns have had with level 2 chargers. You mentioned this, where there have been, kind of costs that weren't clear to folks up front that later on became clear. And then there's also just a question of, in a county like ours that is more sparsely populated, how do you optimally kind of do this?
Yeah, I think to me, next steps are generally getting with you guys to start to identify good locations where these could go. And then from there, if you guys wanted me to, I would then send a team from my company to those locations to identify what can and can't be done there. And then ultimately presenting you guys with probably 3 or 4 options for each location to say, okay, here's charging station deployment A with 2 or 3 business models, and here's deployment B with 2 or 3 business models. And then letting you guys to figure out what ultimately you want to do and how we can execute on it.
Okay.
Is
And,
there a fee for service to that point?
No, I would do all of that for nothing.
And when we're looking at locations, you mentioned you could assist us with that. There's going to be a limited number of spots that are county owned,
Yep.
right? So many of these spots, the best spots are, I'm imagining, would be privately owned. What's your role in working with private landowner, business owner in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you guys could make a connection with our company and them, then I would just take it from there. I think identifying the county-owned locations would be a good place to start, and I could probably end up crossing off 20% of them pretty quickly.
Yep.
And then ultimately from there, if this location looks really good, but you guys don't own it, if you could connect me with that person, then I could take it from there.
Great. Excellent. Are there other questions? Will, thank you. This is great. This is exactly, I think, what we needed to set the table here for us. Are there other questions for Will while we've got him here? Or, okay, is that Tistria? I'm sorry. Oh, no, that's Denal. Supervisor Collins.
Yeah. Hey, Will, how are you?
Good, how are you, sir?
Good. I just wanted to address David's point about, the rurality, I guess, of our area. We have a number of small villages, some of which already have like level 2 chargers. But really the waxing and waning of the population by weekend and weekday. Do you see any like small villages try to upgrade to a DC fast charger from level 2? Or so variable, so they try to just usually stay within a
I
level
think
2?
the small towns that I have worked with in the past who did an early adoption of level 2 chargers generally are looking to upgrade, mostly because they're not getting a lot of activity at them. And one of the reasons they're not getting activity on them is because people who are traveling by are generally not going to stop at a charger that's going to take 8 hours to charge a vehicle.
Right.
It's great for the people who live there, but if there are not enough cars there to sustain that investment, then it's kind of a waste. Right. So the small towns, we're looking to turn them from kind of drive-by towns to kind of stop in towns. And that's what a DC fast charger will do. Right. People are looking to, as they're traveling, stop somewhere for 15 to 40 minutes, charge their vehicle, walk around town, get a cup of coffee or whatever they're doing, and then be on their way. And that to me is what we're looking to do, especially in these rural towns that don't have a giant population. You're not doing this for the population. You're doing it to try and bring people in from outside of the population. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But the speed increase makes it provocative enough where you'll actually see an advancement in participation.
Yeah, and because the cars are now built, the GPS system, like in my car, tells me where all of the charging stations are. So as I'm driving, if my car needs to charge, it will direct me to a charger, and I can sort it by fast charger. So it will only bring me to a fast charger. And generally, if I have to get to Plattsburgh from Hudson, I'm not going to stop at a level 2 charger. I need to stop at a DC fast charger to get going.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Matt Stinchcomb.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Will just shared. As a longtime electric car driver, I've maybe once or twice used the level 2 charger that was in the town. But it really, like, if I have to travel any significant distance, I'm really mapping my route based on where the fast chargers are. And so I think that's an interesting opportunity. Both, are we thinking in proximity to, say, the Taconic or something that's passing through Columbia County, but also, where do we want to drive people? Because there is an opportunity, and I think Tesla's done a good job with their network, at least to make sure that they're in the right places and that there's a coffee option or someplace where you can go for 20 minutes. So it could be cool to actually try to very intentionally kind of do some placemaking with these chargers.
For sure. That's most of the municipalities I work with are like, they're asking me where it would make the most sense. And a lot of it is surrounded by where the city center is, and is it within a 5-minute walk of that charger to now spend a couple of extra bucks in time. That's kind of what we're looking at.
Yep. Supervisor Adams.
Oh, I was just going to put another name on that tag, and I think it's called, we might, it becomes almost an economic development plank to think about where we want to bring business. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, are you doing any work with hospitals? I mean, we haven't talked about that at all, and it seems to me that that's a service that would be useful in that location.
I'm working with Ellis Hospital, Albany Medical Center. I have 200 or so chargers going throughout Bon Secours medical facility down in Monroe. So those are more level 2 chargers, mostly because of the dwell time, the time spent at those locations. But every one of those is also an owner operator model. The nonprofit hospitals just don't have a budget for it typically. They have other things they have to worry about. They would love the amenity on site, but it's not something they're ready to invest in. So we are willing to do that at those locations.
Thank you.
Bill.
Yes, Will, as far as a replacement of a level 2 existing one now, what are the options in terms of putting in a fast charger as far as the municipality's outlay of cash, or if they didn't want the ownership anymore and would pass it on to Livingston?
It's what we did for the city of Amsterdam. So I went and replaced their very expensive level 2 chargers with our level 2 chargers, and we're not going to charge them a penny to do it. To upgrade it to a DC fast charger, we're going to have to figure out, because they operate on 2 different types of power.
Yes.
The level 2s are going to run on 208 volts, 240 volts sometimes. The level 3s, the DC fast chargers, are on 480, so high voltage.
Right.
So a lot of times it's available there off of a pole, off of an electrical pole. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So ultimately, each site will just have to take a look at. We can do what's called a step up transformer, and we'll just have to take a look at what's going to go into making that happen and evaluate. I can tell you guys all day that we are willing to do this owner operator model. It is going to depend on what the costs are there. I can't do it 100% of the time. Sometimes the model just doesn't make sense. I've got $300,000 worth of investment. It might not make a lot of sense. So we'll just have to look at them all, and I'd be more than willing to take a look at everything you guys are willing to offer me, and we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Will, I want to thank you again for joining us. I know this was incredibly informative for me, and I think there's a lot for us to chew on. So we'll look forward to getting the information that you said you would forward, and I'll forward it to the group, and we will definitely be back in touch with questions and next steps. So thank you. Any other last questions for Will while we have him here? Okay, great. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Anytime, guys. You too.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll send that information around, and we can continue talking in terms of, just for the next few minutes, understanding our next steps. There's a lot of really good ideas that came in there. It sounds like there might be an opportunity for us to have them come in and own and operate these, which would remove the concerns that we've had. There's an opportunity for economic development, and as Matt said, placemaking, which I think is really compelling. And I think this I think this warrants a smaller group to continue to look at this question and follow up, a committee of sorts. And I don't know if there's anyone wants to volunteer for that right now, but please let me know if you're interested in pursuing some of these questions. Supervisor Adams raised her hand, so that's great. And it's great to get a few people to start looking at these questions and start digging in deeper. And Matt Stinchcomb, do you want to say something, Matt? Or are you raising your hand?
I'm just raising my hand.
Okay, great. So Matt as well. Thank you. And we will follow up. If there are others, just let me know. But if we'll follow up and keep this conversation going. The last couple things I just wanted to cover real quick. I don't think there's much of an update on the climate adaptation plan. We did have a call with Cornell. A bunch of us were on it to just kind of set the table, and there wasn't much takeaway other than just kind of describing the process from here. And we'll certainly update folks as things move ahead. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on that, the resilience plan.
David, was that call with the various town representatives?
Yes.
And was it well attended?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It was. It wasn't that informative, to be honest. I mean, it was very general. So that was, there's not much for us to say in terms of, next steps. But that will come, and we will certainly make sure people are informed. The last two things, the minutes on the bylaws. So the county is in the process of developing formal bylaws for our task force, which is great. In my mind, that means that we are an organization or a task force that will continue to play a role as an advisory body to the county, which is really promising. And there's some changes that will come with that. The plan is to adopt these bylaws, but they wouldn't go into effect until next year. And one of the major changes that will come with this is the way the membership is now. It's kind of a bit ad hoc. We put together a number of us. Were people that were interested, had some expertise, have been active in the Climate Smart program. And it's been great. This is a great group. And hopefully most of us, if not all of us, who want to continue to serve will be able to. The way the bylaws are set up, at least the draft, is that each town would have the opportunity to put forward a representative, similar to the EMC, and how that model works, which is great in that it allows us to have geographic diversity throughout the county. And I don't think that necessarily changes much in terms of our composition, because we already have quite a bit of diversity, but there might be some changes. Again, these would not go into effect until next year. So I don't know if Supervisor Adams, if you have anything else to add on this, but we will, certainly share them when they are adopted so people can digest them.
No, I share your support for having this piece in place. I think it's going to make provide for long-term sustainability of the organization, and I really appreciate that we've taken this step forward.
Yeah, and thank you for helping shepherd that forward to the supervisors. Tistria.
Yeah, I'll just second that. Brenda and myself and Denal and Ron, as the supervisors on this committee, have been working with the chairman, and I think we've come up with a document that really works. I like that we're kind of implementing it slowly to ensure that there's not an overwhelming amount of members, but also so that membership can have membership. So I think there's some nice things in there, and I appreciate everyone's time. And that's all.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately, it's not going to change much. It helps support the work we're doing so that we can put kind of the functionality ahead of the formalism, and we can continue to do work efficiently as volunteers, mostly volunteers. So that's what we have there. That's all we have. There's some follow-up. There's a lot of good stuff. I wanted to just see if there were any. We want to adopt the minutes from last time. I know that Jennifer Phillips, who had to drop off, made a suggestion by email that we include a link to the Heat Smart campaign in the minutes, which I'll work with Maureen to make sure that happens. And if there are any other comments on the minutes from last time, otherwise we'll take a motion in a second to adopt them.
I'll move it, Adams.
Great. And a second,
I'll second. Terrence.
Terrence, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Speak up now. Great, they're adopted unanimously. That's all we have. We're still 7 minutes ahead of noon. That's pretty good considering we covered a lot of ground. And please feel free to reach out if there's anything that I may have forgotten or we want to put on the agenda for next time. Thank you for your time. And
Just one last question.
yes,
Can you tell me when you sent the contact list out?
I thought I included it in my email yesterday with the agenda.
Okay,
Did I-
I'll look for it.
If for some reason I forgot to do that, I will send it again. I will forward the information from Cal and Will from eClay that I get and from Will as well. And we will organize a call in the next week or so with Matt and Supervisor Adams and anyone else that wants to join an EV committee to further move this along. Just let me know.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all and have a good day. Stay warm.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.